Hello, everyone. Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Thursday, the 28th of April, 2022. Our topic today is President Grant's money. Now, some of you may be aware that the media and the Academy is celebrating the bicentennial of Ulysses Grant's birth, and they're running around wild with all the praise that they can heap on him. And now they've even got, apparently, they've got politicians on both sides of the aisle contemplating whether or not they should posthumously award Grant 5 stars and make him the only 5-star general from the 19th century. Okay, so really, to get to the truth about Grant, get U.S. Grant's Failed Presidency by Philip Lee. $20 at Amazon, $24 if you want an autographed copy from me. Email me, Phil, PHIL_Lee, LEIGH @me.com. I'm probably going to have some more stories about Grant because this bicentennial praise that he's getting is nauseating, and the truth needs to get out there. Buy this book and you can get you can help get the truth out there. And if you like it, please give it 5 stars at Amazon too. You can't imagine how much that helps us. Okay, so let me go ahead and get started on my narration here. President Grant's money. During the present bicentennial of his birth, the usual academic and media experts unreasonably praise Ulysses Grant. There is even talk of bipartisan political support to posthumously make him a 5-star general. But he lacks the character, as a study of his presidency will show, most definitely, even more so than a study of his generalship. Yesterday's post or video on YouTube provided a mostly humorous example of the corruption within his 2 presidential terms. But today's YouTube video and blog post reveals Grant's always devious connection to money. During Grant's first presidential term, 1869 to 1873, railroads were a booming business. That was partly because those with influential connections to the Republican Party could often rely upon lucrative land grants and other subsidies, such as federal guarantees on railroad bonds. After the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific lines met at Utah in 1869 to form the first transcontinental railroad, other roads augmented the industry's continued transcontinental expansion. None, however, were more publicized than the Northern Pacific. It was backed by Philadelphia's J. Cook and Company, which had risen to become America's most distinguished investment bank as the leading underwriter of the nation's bonds during the leading underwriter of the nation's bond sales during the Civil War. The name of J. Cook and Company was at least as honored as Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs is today, at least that prestigious. Anyway, when the end of the war came, it slashed Cook's government bond business, and thereby led him to look for new ways to replace that lost business, and the railroad industry seemed to be the right way to go. Originally chartered by Congress in 1864, the Northern Pacific was to connect Lake Superior with Puget Sound. Yet by 1870, it had not built even a single mile of track. Cook reasoned that he could buy the company at a bargain price if he could get Congress to extend the life of its charter and provide him other concessions. After paying a consulting fee, scare quotes, to one of President Grant's personal secretaries, Horace Porter, he learned that Grant was as, quote, as firm as a rock, close quote, on an 1870 bill tailor-made to Cook's needs. He decided to raise $100 million directly from investors by selling new issues of Northern Pacific securities in the United States and Europe once that bill passed, and the bill did pass. To stimulate demand among public investors, he persuaded several prominent men to become shareholders. Examples included Henry Ward Beecher, future President Rutherford Hayes, and Grant's first vice president, Schuyler Colfax. The 1870 Act gave the company more time to complete construction without losing rights to its land grants and other subsidies. The act also allowed Cook to collect a $200 fee in stock for each $1,000 bond sold, as well as a 12% cash commission. Grant dumped the dubiously loyal Colfax, who was thinking about maybe even running for president himself, for the 1872 re-election ticket. So he dropped Colfax as vice president. And it was fortuitous. It was a fortuitous decision for Grant because Colfax was eventually wrapped up in the Credit Mobley scandal. That scandal involved corrupt financing of the Union Pacific Railroad and started to become public in the fall of 1872 as the votes were being taken for the 1872 presidential election. Although Grant had earlier replaced Colfax with Massachusetts Senator Henry Wilson, it turns out that Wilson had also become connected to Credit Mobley. Even though Wilson admitted his involvement, he claimed that he had returned the bribe, which was in the form of bargain price Credit Mobley stock. Be that as it may, the 1870 Act applicable to the Northern Pacific left Cook eager to help keep President Grant in office. As a result, he became the largest contributor to Grant's 1872 re-election campaign, which put them on friendly terms professionally and socially. As the Northern Pacific stretched westward from Minnesota, rumors of local corruption filtered back east. Civic leaders in towns along the route competed to have their sites included on the line, and contractors seemed to be inflating construction costs. Still, Cook was selling about $1 million in bonds every month. Overseas investors arrived on junkets to ride the rails to the ever lengthening end of the line. By the late summer of 1873, it had reached Bismarck in present-day North Dakota. But the railroad was generating little actual revenue. Nearly all of its operations and construction were funded by debt. Anything that prevented Cook from selling more bonds and stock, which would pile up that debt, would cause the Northern Pacific to coast to a halt. Credit Mobley was just such a factor. On the morning of September 18th, 1873, Grant shared breakfast with J. Cook at the latter's estate outside Philadelphia, where the president was a house guest. The news of Credit Mobley had been gaining momentum, and by noon of that same day, September 18th, 1873, J. Cook and Company was forced to close its doors. There could hardly have been a bigger surprise to the public confidence. One Philadelphia newspaper reported, quote, "No one could have been more surprised if snow had fallen during a summer noontime," close quote. Without new sales of Northern Pacific securities, bonds, and stock, Cook and Company soon ran out of cash. Hinterland banks triggered the debacle when they tried to withdraw their deposit at Cook's banks in order to pay farmers in the Midwest for their harvests. Cook's failure to be able to pay those banks initiated a panic and then a 10-year depression. The bonded indebtedness of the railroad industry was over $2.2 billion. That was equal to the entire debt of the federal government, which had been inflated by massive deficit spending during the Civil War. Price declines of 50% were common among the leading rail stocks during this panic period in the fall of 1873. Brokers called customers for more securities margin, but few could meet the calls. Their brokers failed, and the New York Stock Exchange shut its doors for 10 full days. Imagine if you own stock and for 10 days you couldn't, you call your broker and say, "I'd like to sell." You can't sell. There's no market. That just amplified the decline. Okay, to really understand what's going on here, get U.S. Grant's failed presidency, $20 at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, $24 if you want an autographed copy from me. Just email me, Phil, PHIL _ Lee, LEIGH at me.com. Don't let the politicians continue to glorify Grant. Well, there was probably not a more corrupt president in our history, except for perhaps, well, Joe Biden. We'll have to wait and see whether what his story looks like in the end. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.